Hey folks, back on the videos, and we are into the second week of this new cycle on the Fortify prescription. Hope you're enjoying it. I do these, if you're new to the prescription, I do these videos every week, most of the time. I had a week of writing last week, but every week I'll be in touch to either give you an overview of what we're looking for in the prescription, or just to talk about general lifestyle and training factors, nutrition factors that people have asked me about or that I think are relevant. So I guess if you're here for the long haul, you might hear me talk about some of the same things again and again. Well, part of the reason for that is because the basics are really important and they're not that complicated. Obviously, there's a lot of complexity that underlies everything, but breaking things down to be as basic as they can is so important for us all to be able to get our heads around it. Otherwise, we're all busy people and we'll just drown in information otherwise. So today I'm going to talk about two things. I'm going to talk about single leg or single arm movements in the Fortify prescription and how to use them. And I'm also going to talk about protein in terms of nutrition. So the first thing, single leg or single arm movements. So an example would be, I think this week, the build on the Fortify prescription, you guys have got landmine single leg deadlifts, I believe. Now, when we're doing single limb movements or unilateral movements, as a coach would call it, what we're looking for, I don't expect every person to be symmetrical on both sides because humans aren't symmetrical. We're not designed to be symmetrical. But what we do want is to have an amount of balance. What we don't want is a right leg that can split squat 60 kilos on a barbell and a left leg that can struggles to squat 20 or 30 kilos. There's always going to be some difference in terms of how the mechanics of your body work and also how heavy they can lift. So what I would always say on single limb movements is that we want to let the weaker side dictate the load. So unless there's some extenuating circumstance, I'll always say if I'm doing bent over dumbbell rows and my right arm is feeling really strong at say 20 kilos and my left arm's finding it tough, I'll leave it there for both sides. So I'll actually let my left arm have a bit of a tougher workout than my right arm. And that just allows us to create some form of balance. And you might notice that certain movements are really tricky for you, but that's just an idea of how I would do the loading for a unilateral movement to create balance in the body. Because what we don't want is to go into a pull-up, say, for example, using the rowing context, and my right arm to be doing 85% of the work and my left arm to be really not doing much. It just leaves that right side open to overuse if we're doing the same movements again and again. Now, on a program like this, you're probably unlikely to get that sort of repetitive overuse strain. So it's not as much of a big deal, but if you do notice big imbalances left to right on any unilateral movement, it is worth letting the weaker side dictate the load, even if that means the stronger side has an easy workout. If you've got any questions about that, please do feel free to drop me a line. Second thing I wanted to talk about today was the importance of your protein intake. Something I've talked about on Instagram a little bit when I've been touching on breakfasts, and I've talked about in my newsletters as well. Protein really is the essential macronutrient that needs to be the building block of every single meal that we have. You'll have all heard the arguments against carbs and against fats, and really they're all extremist points of view, but we're going to forget carbs and fats for now, and we're going to talk about protein. Protein is it's a molecule that is the building blocks of your body, and we typically think about protein in terms of building muscle, and it's important for building muscle, but it's also important for so many other functions in your body. And not just functions, but structures in your body. So getting enough protein is really, really important, and we want to get it in the most bioavailable form. Now, from my opinion, that's going to be meat, eggs. There's a little bit in dairy, and then there is proteins in some vegetables, but honestly, it's not that digestible in vegetables. I'm not saying you don't have it. I'm just saying that that's where a lot of the arguments for vegetarian and veganism fall down, is that actually the protein that's available in those products aren't actually as bioavailable as they are in meat. So whatever your source of protein, we want to be getting enough in. And for me, the first thing I think about when I'm creating a meal or planning a meal is, where's my protein coming from? So let's think about a typical tea time. I'm always going to go for a good hand-sized portion of protein, and I'm always aware of what comes with that protein. So if I have a hand-sized portion of chicken versus a hand-sized portion of steak, I'm going to be just very aware that with the steak comes a higher fat level, and with the chicken comes very low fat levels. Now, that is neither good nor bad. It's just something that I'm aware of, because when I'm building the meal, I'm thinking about the fats and the carbs and the protein and how they all inter-impact each other, and how they impact my metabolism, so my energy levels and my recovery. And also digestion as well, actually, because protein and fats are very slow digesting macronutrients. Carbs, they digest much, much quicker. So depending on what I'm doing will depend on how I take that food in. One thing that is so important, because protein is slower digesting, is that we eat it in as much of a relaxed state as possible. And this is more of a lifestyle thing, really, than a nutrition thing, but the two are completely interlinked. If we are constantly eating our food in a rush, on the go, in a stressed out state, and you don't even need to feel stressed for your body to be in fight or flight. If I'm sat at my desk rushing to get my programming done, and I'm trying to stuff some food down at the same time, and then I'm rushing off out to do something, I'm not going to digest that food. My body is not going to let me digest that food, because what my nervous system is experiencing is fight or flight. And that is not going to help us digest those proteins and get that food into the system, get that nutrition into the system to allow us to actually recover from the training we're doing. So what can you do when you're eating your tea? Well, we can make sure we're in a quiet, calm environment. Those of you with kids might, or even dogs, might say that's impossible, but just sitting as a family, just taking a few breaths before you start eating can completely change what your central nervous system is perceiving as happening in that moment. Taking the time to chew your food. I've heard OPEX and James Fitzgerald talk about 30 chews per mouthful. I don't prescribe a certain amount of chews, but we need to be chewing our food more than a couple of times, and meat in particular needs chewing. What that does is it starts a digestive process. Enzymes are released when the food is in your mouth being chewed. Enzymes are released in your stomach that start the digestive process, ready to receive the food. And little things like that can actually have a huge difference on how much we're actually taking in from what we eat. And for those of us that are busy, that aren't able to get to the gym tons, and that struggle to get good quality food in, it's really important that when we do, that we actually recover from it properly and help maintain our bodies properly. It's very rare, talking about protein, it's very rare that anyone in our society, in the Western world, is going to be malnourished in terms of protein, because we all have a lot of food available. Some would say too much. We can have what we want when we want it, generally. And a lot of the foods we have available do have protein in them. Now, for someone who's trying to build muscle or recover from fairly high levels of training, and even just someone on the Fortify prescription where you're doing strength training for 3 to 4 times a week, we do need to eat a bit more protein than the average person and make it an aim. So I talk about breakfast quite a lot because breakfast is a meal that often either gets skipped or is just toast or cereal. Just having toast or cereal to me seems like a waste of time. You're wasting a great opportunity to kickstart your day with protein. And don't forget that we've fasted for 8 to 12 hours overnight. We need to replenish our system. We need to start rebuilding the system. And it's not just about muscle, it's about everything in your body. We depend on protein. So that is my chat for this week. I hope that was useful. Hope it was interesting. Please do get in touch with me with any questions you might have. If you feel like individually you want to go deeper on this stuff, I have one-to-one coaching options. I have a slot available on my one-to-one coaching. I also have a couple of slots available on Against the Grain, which is a more intensive sort of 3-month weekly calls going into your personal nourishment, movement, and lifestyle practices, and actually educating you on that. The one-to-one coaching is more, I provide you with more in-depth programming and consults every 4 to 6 weeks. So if you're interested in them, please do drop me a line, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you.